It is May 27th and our tour to the Isle of Man starts in Italy from the VILLARBOIT service area on the A4, the meeting point agreed upon by the 4 participants. The first stage will take us to REIMS in France, where we will arrive in the evening after about 800 kilometers. The group consists of 3 Honda Goldwing 1800 and a BMW K1600, all motorcycles ideal for this type of long distance travel. The climate is perfect for traveling by motorbike, and we begin to go up the Aosta Valley, immediately meeting the Bard Fort on our right. Considering the morning time, the traffic is practically non-existent, and we quickly approach our first waypoint corresponding to the Mont Blanc Tunnel. After the Courmayeur Junction, we unfortunately come across a long construction site in which we see absolutely no one working. This causes us a small slowdown that will accompany us to the border, but we are thus able to better enjoy the beautiful panorama that surrounds us. We then travel through the Mont Blanc Tunnel with its almost 12 kilometers in length. The toll for the tunnel is far from cheap, considering that it costs over €40 for a return trip, but it is the fastest and almost obligatory way to reach our destination. And here we are in France, surrounded by a stupendous coniferous vegetation. We take Route 10205 with its panoramic views, its wide hairpin bends, and almost perfect asphalt, and in a few minutes we reach the valley.
Life is a crazy way of turning everything upside down. So move with the time that you have, the world will keep spinning round.
Leaving the Alps behind us, we head northwest towards Lyon, skirting the Swiss border for a short distance near Geneva. We then cross the beautiful little lake of Sillon with its emerald waters and then turn north following the so-called Green Highway A39 in the direction of Dijon. Near Arles we stop for a quick lunch break after covering the first 400 kilometers.
Listen, I wanna be there with you no matter where you go.
Restarting after the break, we take advantage of the practically deserted highway to dedicate ourselves to some nice video footage of the group. It is simply a way to fight the moments of boredom of these long highway journey stages.
High up above the clouds, you know that time doesn't wait for your dreams. We're living right here and now. Don't wait for tomorrow.
I often travel this route to the north of France, and every time I am struck by the number of wind turbines that are installed. As regards the methods of energy production, we really have a lot to learn from France. It's now late afternoon and we arrive in Reims just in time to still enjoy a few hours of light and take a nice tour around the city before going to dinner. Reims is primarily known as the Champagne capital, but over the centuries it has also been the coronation city of almost all the French kings. During the visit, even if brief as in our case, you must absolutely not miss seeing, at least externally, the Cathedral of Notre Dame with the nearby Tau Palace, the Royal Square and Dru d'Erlon Square, centre of the city nightlife with its dozens of restaurants and bistros. We got up early again this morning, and shortly after dawn we are already on our saddles. This is unfortunately necessary for the appointment that we cannot miss at Eurotunnel, with the train already booked and having to submit to all customs and safety duties. We therefore quickly leave REIMS to go and take the A26 highway and devour the 280 kilometers that separate us from Carla. This second stage will take us to Stratford in England, after having travelled just over 600 kilometers. Even today the highway is practically deserted and wind turbines continue to be our travelling companions in increasing numbers. We continue on the A26 highway in the direction of Carla. We travel fast and we are right on schedule. However, the beautiful morning sun has given way to many clouds that have now completely covered the sky. I fear that it will be a condition we will have to get used to for the next few days of travel. We reach the access portal to the Eurotunnel, and here too the traffic is really modest. With reservations already done, access operations are really quick and simple. We just have to enter the ticket code on the terminal and that's it. We then undergo customs and security checks and go to the quay for boarding. We board the shuttle train which, running under the English Channel, will take us from Carla to Folkestone in about 30 minutes. We all take advantage of the perfect telephone coverage on board to send a few messages during the transfer. The cost of the return ticket is around €150, using the lowest fare which does not allow for changes in date or time. The only alternative would be the ferry, much cheaper but which would involve a considerable loss of time. And here we are officially on English soil. We pass from the quay towards the exit of the Eurotunnel terminal. The climate is decidedly British, cooler and more humid than that left in France. It is the moment of the first contact with the British road system and its left-hand drive which always creates some apprehension, especially in the first moments. In reality, it doesn't take us long to get used to it, also because with the group it is not the first time that we have landed in the United Kingdom. Here is the first encounter with a double-decker, the classic bus of the British tradition, in this case, a vintage one decorated for a wedding. We also experience the chaotic traffic of the London area in which we waste a lot of time. But we appreciate the education of the drivers who favour our passage. Finally, we leave the highway in the Oxford area and begin the approach to Stratford on regular roads. There are now only about 50 kilometres to go. We cross the town of Woodstock, which however has nothing to do with the homonymous and much more famous town in the USA. Even today we arrive at our destination on time, and we will be able to dedicate ourselves to visiting Stratford-upon-Avon with all the necessary calm. The city is best known for being the birthplace of William Shakespeare, and for this reason it is a very popular destination from all over the world, with about 5 million visitors per year. The birthplace of the writer is well preserved and visible in the historic centre of the city. Even today plays of his works are held in the city every day by the Royal Shakespeare Company. I have to admit that Stratford-upon-Avon was a pleasant surprise. A pretty little town nestled on the banks of the Avon River. From this then extend a whole series of lateral branches managed with lock systems which make the landscape absolutely special. We begin our third day of travel, and today the weather is really in perfect English style. During the night it rained and the temperature dropped drastically. We are around 8 Celsius degrees. However, it is not a big problem since we are all well equipped. Today's stage will take us to our final destination, Douglas on the Isle of Man. As the ferry's boarding in Liverpool is not until 7:15 p.m, we will have a nice drive up to the Peak District National Park, which seems to offer some beautiful roads and views not to be missed. We then proceed in a northwesterly direction, bypassing Birmingham and carefully avoiding the highway in order to begin to immerse ourselves in the landscapes of the English countryside. It must be admitted that the contrast between the bright green of the vegetation and the leaden grey of the sky creates a decidedly particular atmosphere. We cross the Blythefield Reservoir, a water reserve that represents a paradise for the wildlife that populates it, so much so that it was designated in 1988 as a site of special naturalistic scientific interest. We then reach Ashbourne, which represents the southern access gate to the Pock, and is famous, at least in England, for being the scene of the Royal Shrovetide football match, the medieval football vaguely similar to the Italian historic Florentine football, which is held every year during Shrove Tuesday.
This is the time we form the chorus. Left your voice for those before us. We can rely on one another. Feel the pride, let's show our colors.
We are finally inside the Pock. The terrain begins to change and the plain gives way to rolling hills. We face the first soft curves in sequence, to be brushed one after the other, surrounded by luxuriant meadows and full of grazing cattle. Then it often happens to come across farms directly on the roadside, which overlook ordered fields and perfectly delimited by dry stone walls. Going further and further into the Peak District National Park, the reliefs begin to be a little more pronounced, even if they remain extremely gentle in any case. However, the green colour is always the master. Among various ups and downs, we approach one of the most famous and interesting viewpoints of the Pock, the Winnets Pass. For heaven's sake, nothing to do with the Alpine passes we're used to, but it still has its charm. I also see a lot of similarity with the typical much more northern landscapes, such as those of Scotland and Norway, which I have had the opportunity to see on other trips. We reach Castleton, a very popular tourist resort, especially among hikers. In fact, many paths start from the village and enter the Hope Valley, which is one of the most picturesque in the park. From Bamford, the village with which the Hope Valley actually ends, we take the A6013 State Road, and after a few kilometres we meet the Ladybower Dam on our left, which is characterised by a circular overflow, similar to a gigantic sink drain 25 metres deep. We begin to skirt the Ladybower, the downstream reservoir of a cascading water system that includes two other reservoirs, Howden and Derwent, which together supply water to all communities in the East Midlands. Now it's time to follow the Snake Road, one of the most popular destinations for British motorcyclists, which leads to the pass of the same name. It is a road full of many beautiful curves, and is therefore very pleasant to travel on a motorbike. Once at the pass, the panorama is really interesting, despite the altitude being limited to just over 500 meters. We begin the descent to exit the park. We have been informed that unfortunately many streets in Liverpool will be closed to traffic for the celebration of the local football team, and therefore we have to anticipate the arrival at the port. We then reach Glossop, effectively leaving the Peak District Park. It was definitely a fulfilling experience. After crossing the country, we then quickly take the M67 highway in the direction of Manchester. We travel the Manchestering Road in a brisk way. Fortunately, being Sunday, despite being 4 p.m, the traffic is very flowing. We are now less than 50 kilometers away from our finish line. The reduced distance and the breadth of the respective suburbs make Manchester and Liverpool two cities almost connected to each other. Once in Liverpool, we immediately head towards the port area. To get there, however, we are forced to pass through the city centre, and this unfortunately creates many problems for us, considering that many roads have already been closed to traffic in advance, including the one that leads directly to the port. After a long series of mandatory detours signalled in an approximate way, we still reach the Steam Packet Company terminal, where we queue up with the other motorcyclists to check the boarding tickets. We finally access the pier. The commitment of 450 kilometers and 10 hours of riding today are clearly visible on my face. The poor maintenance of the floor of the quay certainly does not help the entry maneuver. We park the motorbikes and dedicate ourselves to a few moments of relaxation, given that the day will still be quite long. The arrival at the destination in Douglas is in fact expected around midnight. The ferry arrives punctually and in a few minutes completes the docking and disembarking operations. The cost of the return ticket for the tourist trophy period is just over €300 and must be booked at least 1 year in advance. We're finally ready to board, and we're being routed neatly in groups to the rear loading area. We access the hold of the Mannanen, which will take us to the Isle of Man in about 4 hours of navigation. I already have a lot of experience with ferries, but I must admit that the organisation here is truly perfect. It is clear that they are used to managing this kind of motorcycle transhumance without problems. We set sail on time, and within minutes, enjoying the skyline of Liverpool, we were out of the port. Once seated, we take advantage of the self-service on board and then relax until our arrival. But not before enjoying a beautiful and colourful sunset from the stern. Douglas is the capital of the Isle of Man, and over a third of the entire population lives there. The city has given birth to famous characters, among which the Bee Gees stand out. It is the economic reference of the island, and like it, it's also closely linked to art and tradition. For example, walking through the centre, it is not difficult to come across a toestrack, the traditional local horse-drawn tram. Here we are finally ready to see the island. Curiosity is really great, also considering that the trip was originally supposed to take place in 2020, but then due to the COVID pandemic it was postponed for 2 consecutive years. Starting from our hotel, we begin to ride along the Queen's Promenade, which overlooks Douglas Bay, crossing the whole city from one side to the other. Even today the temperature is anything but summery. It's 6 Celsius degrees and everyone can feel it. Today we will dedicate ourselves to a tour of the island, stopping at the most interesting points. Then we will completely cover the tourist trophy circuit, and finally, before the roads will be closed, we will find a valid point where to enjoy the race tests. We skirt the sea terminal where we arrived last night by ferry, and leaving the city centre behind us, we head towards the bridge that crosses the canal port. On the right we pass Douglas' pretty inland marina as seen from its south pier.
What are we waiting for? It seems we still want more.
We now take the Forton Road, which rises above the harbour and lighthouse, leading us towards the cliffs south of the town. Right on the roadside you can see the headquarters and broadcasting station of Manx Radio, known for its local information and passionate commentary related to the tourist trophy. We are on the cliff and the panorama is fascinating. You can clearly perceive the scent of the waves breaking on the rocks below us. It's just a pity that the weather today isn't the most favourable to be able to appreciate all this even better. We cross the characteristic double arch surmounted by towers, which in fact leads us onto Marine Drive, the panoramic road which runs alongside the entire cliff to the east of the island, and which could take us directly up to Castletown, if unfortunately there weren't a portion that it's private and that it's not passable. Reached Pigeon Stream, we stop briefly to admire the beautiful landscape, take some pictures and play a bit with the drone. We take the Marine Drive in the opposite direction to return to Douglas, and from there take the road to Castletown and then head towards the southeast tip of the island.
To the top of the
I take advantage of the itinerary for some brief news on Man. It is a sort of suspended world. It is in fact a dependency of the British Crown but is not part of the United Kingdom and has an autonomous government and administration. The British monarch is however defined as Lord of Man. The island has an area of 570 square kilometers and has just over 80,000 inhabitants. It prints its own currency and has a respectable national income per capita, which even places it in 5th place in the world, based for almost 20% on online gambling. The dense white smoke that can be glimpsed on the right is linked to another characteristic element of Man, the steam train. The historic railway dating back to 1873 is in fact still regularly operational on the line that connects Douglas to Port Erin, on the southwest end of the island. We return to Marine Drive after skipping the private impassable portion. We always travel along the edge of the cliff, and here too the panoramic view is truly enchanting. We are now close to reaching Castletown. Before entering the city, however, we will make a detour towards the small spit of land that characterises the southeast tip of the island. Once on the Fort Island Road, we enjoy the landscape of the beach and the sea just a few meters from us, and we approach our next waypoint on a road that gradually becomes narrower and narrower. We arrive near the Castletown Golf Club. We are at the most southeastern tip, and from here St. Michael's Island with the small Derby Fort is visible a short distance away.
So good to be alive. This feeling's running high. Oh, life is calling.
We resume our route and after a few kilometers we enter Castletown. We come out on Bridge Street, which runs along the beautiful little port near the Cane Bridge, the pedestrian bridge that connects the historic centre of the town. We then cross the canal port and take Castle Street in search of a convenient parking space. Castletown is the historic capital of the Isle of Man. It was here that the Viking kings decided to build the fortress symbol of their power, Castle Rushen. It is one of the best preserved medieval castles in the world, and some studies date its construction to around 1200 AD. After the short visit, we continue our trip westwards towards Port St. Mary and then head towards the southernmost area of the island. In this area we cross several villages made up of even just a few houses directly facing the road, alternating with open spaces in bright and contrasting colours. So after Cregneash, a truly fascinating panorama opens up before us. We reach the Cardiff Sound, the narrow channel that separates us from Cardiff Man, an islet limited to less than 3 square kilometres, which since 1959 has been transformed into an ornithological park managed by the Manx Wildlife Trust. It represents the southernmost point of the territory of Man. Unfortunately, we are running out of time and have to restart soon. We want to be able to cover the entire tourist trophy circuit, and there are still many things we want to see before the roads will be closed to traffic to make room for the TT riders who will launch into qualifying for the race. The roads are really beautiful, well paved, and invite you to ride quickly. Of course, however, thinking of racing on it as they will during qualifying and race, with peaks close to 300 km per hour, is a completely different matter. Tomorrow morning we have the ferry already booked for the return. Today will be our only day on the island, and therefore, after the reopening of the roads late in the evening, we will have just enough time to return to Douglas at the hotel, pack our bags and sleep a little. We will then go to the port to board for Liverpool, where we will land in the mid-afternoon. We are now entering the town of Peel, approximately halfway along the west coast of the island. This will be our penultimate stop today. After leaving here, we will go directly to the curve of the Ginger Hall Hotel to wait for the riders to pass while enjoying a delicious pint of Guinness. Peel is the fourth largest city on the island by population and is certainly characterised by the homonymous castle which overlooks it, with the St Patrick's Church inside, by the beautiful tourist port which is one of the most renowned also on an international level, and by its long beach of golden sand.
You know you could.
No words would be able to fully express the madness and courage of the pilots taking part in the tourist trophy. I will therefore leave room for the images that certainly make a better idea. Liverpool is the home of the Beatles, and here every corner of the city remembers them, from statues on the waterfront, to the historic Avon Club on Matthew Street, to museums dedicated to them. But Liverpool is also a city that has been able to transform itself profoundly from the greyness of its port tradition at the end of the 19th century, becoming today extremely modern, sparkling and welcoming. The area of the port docks is a good example of this, which has undergone a radical renewal. Since entering the United Kingdom, we have become accustomed to the rain at night, and last night was no exception, accompanying our sleep almost until morning. We leave early. The ground is still damp and the clouds largely cover the sky, but this allows us to see the modern area near the port of Liverpool in a very special light.
Up ahead there's an open door and I gotta find what I'm looking for.
We cross on our left the Three Graces, the Cunard and the Royal Liver building, which are perhaps the three most representative buildings of the city. Yesterday was after all a fairly relaxing day as we practically didn't use the bikes. Arriving in Liverpool after the ferry transfer, we immediately checked into the hotel and then we dedicated ourselves to visiting the city. Today, however, will be a busy day, with a stage of about 450 kilometres in which we will cross all of Wales from north to south, until we reach Cardiff. We leave Liverpool and cross the River Mersey using the Kingsway Tunnel, which passes under it for a total length of 2.5 kilometres. It has a toll of £2, but at the exit there is a special lane for motorbikes for which it is completely free. Once in Wales, we continue west on the highway until we reach Abergele, from where we begin to follow the coast overlooking the Irish Sea. On our right, we can now admire the wide estuary of the Conwy River, which accompanies us to the entrance of the namesake town, which is known above all for its beautiful medieval castle. It is the first of 4 fortresses that make up the so-called Iron Ring, built by Edward I of England to face the Welsh revolts at the end of the 13th century. It is one of the most important medieval castles in Europe, and since 1986 it has been part of the UNESCO Heritage of Humanity. Conwy is a very picturesque town, and in addition to the castle, it also has a strong link with the river it overlooks. Since the time of the Roman invasion, it has in fact been famous for the production of pearls. One of them is even part of the treasury of the British Crown. We pass through the original medieval walls which still surround Conwy and continue our way south. We continue from Penmaenmawr along the Irish Sea onto the A55, which will take us towards the Menai Strait, which separates Anglesey Island from the mainland of Wales. Once in Treborth, we take a short detour of a few kilometres onto Anglesey Island to reach our next waypoint, which will be quite unique. We enter this town, which in fact has no particular beauty to show, but which has a unique feature. It is in fact the city with the longest name in the world. The name is absolutely unpronounceable, but in the Welsh language it has a complete meaning, which means Church of Santa Maria in the Valley of the White Hazel near the Rapids, and the Church of Sant'Esilio near the Red Cave. The souvenir photo is a must. We continue our trip, and using the Britannia Bridge that crosses the Menai Strait, we return to the mainland.
We'll take it all the way and live another day. We'll make a statement to the world that we're here to stay. Whoa, whoa, yeah, yeah.
We continue south, continuing to skirt the strait, even if the A487 has a slightly more inland route which does not allow us to see the sea. After about 15 kilometres, we reach Carnarvon, our new stopping point. The city is best known for its castle, also part of Edward I's Iron Ring. Since 1300 AD, it has become the investiture site of the Prince of Wales, the designated heir to the British throne. We set off again, and this time we head east inland to enter the Snowdonia National Park near Llanberis. The park was established in 1951. It is the third largest in the UK and has a protected area of just over 2,000 square kilometres, including 60 kilometres of coastline. We immediately face the beautiful road that takes us to the Penwye Pass, located at the foot of Mount Snowdon, which gives its name to the entire park. Again, the altitude of 360 metres above sea level is really ridiculous when compared to the Alpine passes, but the view is really worth it.
Just like in a dream, and we won't give up, no, we won't back.
The descent from the pass is perhaps one of the funnest sections in terms of driving so far covered in the entire journey. Arrived at the bottom of the valley, we resume our direction towards the south, practically travelling to the centre of the park.
Yeah. Just like a movie, just like a storybook, we are the future, we're the ones they won't overlook. It's time to be the hero.
The landscape, rich in vegetation at the bottom of the valley, changes rapidly as soon as we go up again, leaving room only for numerous mountain pastures. We then reach the Crimea Pass, and keeping ourselves at altitude, we complete the crossing of the park up to its southernmost point. Leaving the park, we still continue in a southerly direction, but heading back towards the sea in anticipation of our next waypoint. We finally arrive in Aberystwyth, a beautiful town overlooking the sea in the centre of the Welsh coast. I purposely entered this waypoint having been here at the beginning of the 80s for study reasons. I was curious to see how much the city could have changed in all these years. I then remembered with pleasure the fish and chips that I ate on the Royal Pier, the characteristic one that goes into the sea. After the lunch break we continue on the road. The direction is always to the south. We still have almost 200 kilometers to go before we reach Cardiff. In the first kilometers, the A487 runs parallel to the coast but a few kilometers inland. The landscape alternates between dense vegetation and wide open spaces, with the road gently following the various ups and downs. Then almost suddenly we reappear on the coast with a truly pleasant panoramic view. On the horizon is a berry run, one of Wales' most popular tourist places. Having reached the village, we cross it completely, appreciating the famous multicoloured houses on High Street as we pass. After a berry run, we follow the coast for a few more kilometres and then we turn southeast, taking us inland. We are now in South Wales, and here too nature is always predominant. The spaces are mostly very open and always moved by rolling hills. In some moments the impression is of being in Tuscany, but with less marked colour contrasts. We reach Carmarthen, and from here we head to take the A48 towards Swansea and then the M4 highway to reach Cardiff. The famous legend of King Arthur and the Round Table tells that the wizard Merlin would be a native of the area. So much so that the Welsh name of the city of Carmarthen literally means Merlin's fort. We are now at the gates of Cardiff. The most beautiful part of the journey is coming to end. Tomorrow we will simply have 2 highway stages in which we will retrace the outward trip in the opposite direction, but tonight we still need to visit the city. Cardiff is the capital of Wales and seat of the Welsh Parliament. In the city, the contrast between tradition and modernity is very evident, but with the ability to make these two souls coexist perfectly. Examples are the castle of the year 1000 AD and the city centre full of modern buildings beautifully integrated with each other. Another fundamental element for the people of Cardiff is the Millennium Stadium, the temple of rugby, the national sport which is lived with almost religious devotion. After the last 2 stages on the highway, we returned home in Italy on June 3rd. Now is the time to draw conclusions about the journey. It was a decidedly pleasant and positive experience with excellent travel companions. We travelled a total of well over 4,000 kilometres to reach and return from the Isle of Man, but it was absolutely worth it for everything we could admire along the way. The island certainly has a particular charm, and the tourist trophy deserves to be experienced live at least once. Stratford-upon-Avon and the Peak District Park in England and all of Wales in general were then a really nice surprise, and they absolutely deserved the visit. So overall, definitely a recommended tour.